Hey everyone, this video is all about how to make a good character for your tabletop RPG game. Specific examples will be in the context of Draw Steel, MCDM's new game that's coming out very soon. But we'll be talking first principles and best practices, so you'll be able to take this and apply it to almost any game you can. So let's talk making a good character. The first principle, the only principle, is that the character needs to care. You don't need a gimmick, a funny voice, a deep dark secret. The character needs to care. If you're running a short adventure, they need to care about the hook. If you're running a campaign, then they need to care about the world that campaign is taking place in. If they don't care, then why are they there? In fact, why are you there playing the game if you're not playing a character that cares about what's going on? One of the beautiful things about these games is that we take time out of our days, we make time to spend that time with each other. Right? We're not just playing a game. Everyone is taking or making time to sit together at a table or over the internet to do this together. And by making a character that cares, that's an act of respect towards the other players. A character that cares also allows you to play the game. And I mean that in the fullest extent of that expression. A character that cares encourages you or allows you to engage with what the GM is presenting to you. They engage better with the player characters at the table, and often they engage you better as a player because you are more interested in what that character is trying to accomplish. Sometimes it's fun to make a joke character or a min-maxed murder hobo. We've all done it. There's a time and a place for it. That's not what this video is about. It's not about making a fun or an optimized character. It's about making a good character. Okay, assume your character cares. The next step is to answer why they care and what they care about. If I were getting ready to play a game of Draw Steel today, this is the character pitch that I would make to my director. Dazbog is a dwarf, and he is a paragon censor. Dazbog was curious as a child, and so he joined, or was given, to the Church of Velok Koth the Seeker, the light in the dark, a dwarf hero. He grew up in that church. His life was simple and mostly peaceful. One day he was sent on an errand, but when he returned, he found the church destroyed, the priests slaughtered, and a relic of the hero Velok Koth stolen. With her dying breath, the last priest appointed Dazbog censor and charged him with a threefold task: return the relic, deliver justice to those responsible, and be a bright light in a dark world. So begins the tale of Dazbog, Dwarf Paragon. That's it. One paragraph, 121 words. You don't need more than that. You could actually get away with probably half that. There's actually some fluff in that paragraph. Now let's actually use that pitch to illustrate best practices. First, and most importantly, why does Dazbog care and what does he care about? Why does he care? He cares because his home, his community, his church, his mentors were destroyed. And he cares because he was given a holy task. The why could also be called the inciting incident. And Draw Steel actually does a very good job, I think, of prompting players to answer this question during the character creation process. In that process, the inciting incident is attached to the career that you're picking for a character. In Dazbog's case, he is a disciple. I'll put up on the screen the list of potential inciting incidents that the game has for a disciple. Now, notice that their church was destroyed is not actually on the list. Well, that's fine. I already know how to answer this question, but a lot of players don't, especially newer players. And I think that's a weakness, for example, of things like 5th edition D&D, where there's no explanation, there's no answer in the creation process that explains how a character goes from being a farmer or a sailor to a hero. And so players will create a backstory, come up with a character, but never actually answer that question. That's a very important question to answer. That's the most important question, is how or why they got from here to here, and what are they going to do about it? Okay, we've answered the why. Now the what. That should be obvious. He cares about the tasks that he was given. Return the relic, deliver justice to those responsible, and be a bright light in a dark world. But once again, there's a lot going on here. Let's break them down one by one. Return the relic. Simple and straightforward. Right? The relic could be in the next town over, or it could be in a vault of some powerful novel. Not exactly easy, but simple and straightforward. The next one, deliver justice to those responsible, could be simple and straightforward. He finds them and he kills them, but it doesn't have to be that way. First of all, he might find them and discover that they were actually employed by somebody else. Where does Dazbog assign blame? Also, he might find them and decide, you know what, justice doesn't mean the sword. Justice means penitence, forgiveness, some other form of punishment. It doesn't have to be so black and white. The third one is the most open-ended intentionally. Be a bright light in a dark world. Now, I really liked that when I was reading about Valakoth and I was potentially creating this character. I looked up in the Draw Steel Heroes packet, reading about the dwarf heroes, and this one jumped out at me. And I loved the idea of this image of being a bright light in a dark world, either literally or figuratively. But importantly, this is very open-ended, and that's intentional. What does this mean? I don't know the answer to that question, and it's okay that I don't know the answer to this question. It could mean that Dazbog has to interrogate or try to understand about himself and answer that question. It could mean what it means to be a censor in this world. It could be the teachings of Valakoth and how they come into conflict with the world that Dazbog now finds himself in. How does he navigate trying to be true to the teachings of this dwarf hero and the world that might not respect or understand those teachings? It's up to me as a player to understand and discover this as the game goes along. It's also possible, of course, for these things to come into conflict with one another. Actually, they should come into conflict with one another. For example, the director presents Dazbog with a choice. A town of innocents is under attack and might be destroyed. He can save them. He can be a bright light in a dark world. But also, the relic is nearby. The problem is it's being moved. And if he loses it, if he misses this chance, he might not get another one, or the search has to start all over. Which does he choose? He can only pick one. Right? This is proper for drama in a game, and it's a dramatic decision that Dazbog has to make. Which of his goals does he choose to pursue at the expense of the other? And of course, Dazbog will develop and change over the course of the game. He might care about what it means to be a censor of Valakoth in this world. He might decide that he doesn't care about being a censor of Valakoth and wants to chart his own path or find a new hero to worship or pray to. Worship's probably the wrong word in the context of Draw Steel. He might decide that he wants to gain enough wealth and notoriety to rebuild his church and return the relic to it and recreate what he lost. Or he might decide that the teachings of Valakoth are actually antithetical to being a church, and being a bright light in a dark world means being out in the world. I just thought of that right now. But the point is that because I don't have all of these questions answered, I can come up with these things as the game goes along. And leaving yourself room to do that can be very magical. And that brings us to the first best practice, which is care about at least two things, or at least more than one thing. I have three very obvious ones: return the relic, deliver justice, be a bright light. But I also listed a couple of amorphous, loosey-goosey ones that I might come to care about as the game progresses. And a couple of sub-best practices for this. One is that these goals, what he cares about, what your character cares about, should ideally have different time constraints or take place over different time periods, meaning a short-term, near-term goal that's perhaps more easily solvable, return the relic, and a longer-term goal, something that might be more complex, like deliver justice or be a bright light. Now, in addition to the time variance of the goals, they also could be looser and more defined. Again, return the relic or be a bright light. One is very specific, easy to understand, maybe not easy to accomplish, but easy to understand. And the other is, again, a little bit looser, that allows you to experiment or discover along the way. So variation in the timing of the goals and variation in the specificity or the definition of the goals. Don't have them be assassinate the mayor and assassinate the lich. Those could be interesting, but they're kind of the same thing. Okay, best practice number 2. In the pitch, I wrote, "So begins the tale of Dazbog Dwarf Paragon." And that's intentional. He had a life before the game begins. He had parents, he had a childhood, he had his life as a disciple, but he wasn't a hero. This is where our story begins, with Dazbog becoming a hero. Try not to make a character that has already slain dragons and hoodwinked the lich. It's not as interesting. First of all, it's unrealistic at level 1, because if they've done all that, then why are they level 1? And second of all, it's kind of boring, because it leaves almost no room for your character to discover these things, to be in awe of or fear of the Underdark, to be afraid of a dragon or a lich. If they've already encountered them or, defeated them in some fashion, then the character is just kind of boring. There's no obstacle for them to overcome because they've overcome every obstacle already. That's a finished character. That's a character at the end of a campaign, not the beginning of one. Let the game shape the character over time. Give yourself a chance to learn about the character at the same time that your character is learning about the world. All right. Best practice number 3. Leave loose ends. As a GM, I have run 1,000 games roughly at this point, mostly D&D, but other systems as well. And this is my absolute favorite piece of advice. It should be number 1, but it's down here at number 3 for some reason. And I love this. If I were making a video about how to be a good GM, this would also be on the list of best practices. But what do I mean by leave loose ends? Let's go back to Dazbog's character pitch and take a look. Notice all of the things I didn't mention. I didn't mention his parents, his siblings, where he's from, where his church was, the name of his church, the names of the priests, who attacked the church, why they attacked the church, the name of the relic that was stolen, what the relic looked like, what the relic does, or even what Dazbog looks like. Are any of these things important? Yes, absolutely. But are they critical or required to making a good character? Not at all. And there are 2 reasons for leaving loose ends like this. The first, less important, goes back to the fact that it's the beginning of this character's story. You want to leave some room that the character can fill out later. And that requires, by definition, leaving some loose ends, leaving open-ended pieces of your character's backstory that you can fill in later, kind of like a game of Mad Libs. If I'm playing a one-shot or a short adventure, I don't need to know anything about Dazbog's parents. Now, if the director asks me, prompts me, then I do. But it's not really worth spending the time on it, especially if it can be used later in more interesting or more dramatic fashion. And that leads us to the second, and I think more important reason to leave loose ends, is that you can take a character loose end and a GM loose end and tie them off into some magic bow that makes the whole game way more fun. If the GM is too specific and the player is too specific, then the game can feel like a square peg in a round hole. It's like one player is playing this game over here and another player is playing that game over there, and they don't talk to each other, or there's this massive gulf between them, and it's just not fun, right? And if it's too specific, you don't leave yourself any room for bridging that gap, right? It's like you're in it's like you've got either blinders on or the walls up on your bowling ball lane, and you can't actually come together because you've written yourself into a railroad, into a corner. Don't do that. Please don't do that. And I'll give you an example of this from the current D&D campaign that I'm running, with a loose end that I had and a loose end that a player character came to me with. So while we were prepping for this campaign, one of my players came to me with a character idea, which was essentially that he was a human who had been turned by a wizard. A wizard had turned him into like an automaton or a tin man. And he came to me and said, I don't know, like, is there a wizard like this in your game? or not? Do I have to make one? When would this have happened? Where would it have happened? He came with a bunch of questions. And this was great. Kudos to the player Corey if you're watching this. Hello. Thank you. Because when he had this idea, he just came to me and said, "Is this cool? What do you think about this? Where would this wizard be? Who are they?" He didn't have this idea and then go write 3 pages about this wizard that may or may not even exist in the campaign setting. I would have made one for him. But the point is that he didn't write himself into a corner or write it in such a way that it becomes very difficult for me to use in the game world. Instead, he just asked me about it. And I'm so glad he did, because I had my own loose end, which was a wizard and a wizard tower. When I was making this setting for this campaign, I knew I wanted a wizard tower, because who doesn't want a wizard in his tower? It's an outstanding trope. And so I had this wizard named Constantine and his tower, the Infinity Spire. And that's all I knew. All I knew was the name of the tower, where the tower was, and the name of the wizard. And then I left it because I didn't need it anymore. I had created my tower. I would come back to it later. And then Corey comes to me with this idea and he says, "Is there a wizard?" And I say, "Yes." Right? Before this, I didn't know anything about Constantine. Is he good? Is he bad? But now I have a wizard that I can tie off with Corey's character creation idea. And now that character is really connected to the world, because the Infinity Spire was on the map that I gave to the players. They didn't know what it was at that point, but there it was. And so now the character is connected to the world, and we can use that relationship, that tension, in the games. So we're already over a year into this campaign, and I've been using Constantine as sort of this looming figure periodically, not all the time. Whenever something comes up of Corey he talks about curing his character of his being a Tin Man, and I say, "You know where to find him. You know where Constantine is. You can go ask him." Or if they have some questions about very powerful magic or dangers to this world, there's an archmage just sitting in his tower that you can go ask. And instead of that being a neutral statement, neutral offer, because they don't know anything about Constantine, now whenever I say that, it is very heavy with the implication that Corey's character would be returning to the wizard that cursed him to be an automaton, to be a Tin Man. And that's way more interesting than just a generic thing or something that is so unconnected to the world that none of the other player characters care about it. Now the rest of the group is invested because they know that this wizard did this thing to their friend, and now they all care about it. It's just much more interesting. All right, we come to our fourth and final best practice. Make a character for the game that you're playing. Hopefully this is not a shocking piece of advice, but it is one that bears repeating. It should be given out everywhere, stapled to the inside of every hero's book or dungeon master's guide or player character's guide. Make a character for the game that you're playing. If there are no dwarves in your GM's world, then don't play a dwarf. If the adventure is set in a gothic haunted house, then don't bring a neon lit bard named Electric Boogaloo. If the game is set in a city and it's heavy on interpersonal intrigue, don't bring the Wildman Ranger who only talks to animals. And there are specific reasons for this. This is not just me being a grumpy man who yells at the clouds. The reason is that when you do this, you are essentially cutting off content in the game that you can't interact with. Right? You're removing yourself from a substantial portion of the game. For example, if you're the Wildman Ranger who is in a city and he doesn't want to talk to anybody and none of his skills are useful, you can't do anything. You can't interact with the game, with the world, with the encounters that the director is presenting you with. Or the other thing that happens is that you try to begin to force your character into or onto the game world. As a silly example, that neon lit bard named Electric Boogaloo starts trying to turn the haunted house pink. That might be funny for a little bit, but after a little while, these tonal differences are just going to become too annoying, too frustrating for everybody at the table, and you all stop having fun. Set yourself and your table up for success by making a character that fits with the game world and cares about the game world. So that's it. A good character just needs to care. Care about something in the world and care enough to do something about it. Make a character that cares so that you do too. And along the way, don't forget the best practices. Care about more than one thing. It's the beginning of their story. Leave some loose ends, please, I'm begging you. And make a character that fits the game. If you're getting ready to play Draw Steel and you're making a character, tell me about them down in the comments, especially why they care and what they care about. I would love to hear about how people are navigating inciting incidents, goals, character growth. That's always the most interesting thing to me, especially as mostly a GM, getting to see that and to help build it or pull it out of a character for my players is one of my favorite things about the game. So tell me about it down below in the comments. And if you liked this video, then check out its companion video, How to Play a Good Character, which is about how to take everything we talked about and put it into practice at the table. Thanks. I'll see you next time, and have a beautiful day.